Picture this. You're sailing through misty Caribbean waters when you spot something that shouldn't be there. What would you do? Captain Saltbeard, the most feared pirate of these seas, thought he'd seen everything. But when he and his clever parrot Emerald discovered that abandoned boat, floating like a ghost among the wreckage, he had no idea his entire world was about to change forever. Before we dive into this incredible adventure, make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. The fog was so thick you could cut it with a cutlass. That's when Emerald squawked his first warning. The Caribbean fog wrapped around the Salty Revenge like a wet shroud. Captain Saltbeard squinted through the mist, his weathered hands gripping the ship's wheel. "Blimey, can't see a bloody thing in this soup," he muttered. Emerald, his emerald green parrot, perched on his shoulder and tilted his head. "Something's wrong, Captain, something's very wrong." Saltbeard raised an eyebrow. In 20 years of sailing together, Emerald had never been wrong about danger. "What do you see, old bird?" "There! Starboard bow!" Through the swirling mist, a dark shape emerged. A small wooden boat, maybe 12 feet long, bobbed silently on the gentle swells. No oars, no sail, no crew. "Well, I'll be keel-hauled," Saltbeard whispered. The boat looked ancient. Its wood was blackened with age, and strange symbols were carved deep into its hull. But what caught his attention was the cargo, a single chest, about the size of a rum barrel, sitting perfectly centered in the boat. "Ahoy there!" Saltbeard called out. His voice echoed across the water and died in the fog. Silence. Emerald ruffled his feathers nervously. "Don't like it, Captain. Smells like trouble." But Saltbeard's pirate instincts were already kicking in. An abandoned boat meant one thing: treasure. And that chest looked promising. "Trouble or not, we're taking a look. Drop anchor, boys." His crew of 12 seasoned pirates scrambled to obey. Within minutes, the Salty Revenge sat motionless in the water, her black sails furled. Saltbeard studied the mysterious boat through his spyglass. The chest was made of dark metal, iron maybe, and bound with thick chains. Most interesting of all, it bore a coat of arms he'd never seen before. A golden serpent wrapped around a trident with 3 stars above it. "That's no ordinary treasure chest," he murmured. "Captain," called out Bones McGillicuddy, his first mate, "should we lower a boat?" "Aye, but just me and Emerald. Rest of you stay put." "But Captain—" "No buts, Bones. If something goes wrong, you sail away. That's an order." Saltbeard climbed down into his personal rowboat, a sleek little craft he'd named Sea Whisper. Emerald hopped onto the bow, his sharp eyes scanning the water. The fog seemed to part as they approached the abandoned boat, as if the mist itself was curious about their intentions. Up close, Saltbeard could see the vessel was even older than he'd thought. The wood was so weathered, it looked almost petrified. "Hello there, beauty," he said softly, running his fingers along the boat's edge. That's when he noticed something that made his blood run cold. The boat had no rope marks, no signs of being tied to anything, no water damage from a storm. It was as if it had simply appeared. "Emerald, look at this." The parrot hopped closer to examine the chest. The metal was covered in a thin layer of green patina, but underneath, intricate engravings covered every inch. Symbols that looked almost like writing, but in no language Saltbeard had ever seen. "It's beautiful," Emerald whispered, "and terrifying." Saltbeard reached out to touch the chest, then hesitated. In his years of piracy, he'd learned to trust his instincts. And right now, every instinct was screaming at him to turn around and sail away. But the chest called to him, literally. A low humming sound began to emanate from within the metal container, not mechanical, more like singing, like voices calling from very far away. "Do you hear that?" Saltbeard asked. Emerald's head snapped up. "Hear what, Captain?" The humming grew louder. Saltbeard felt drawn to the chest like iron to a magnet. His hand moved toward the chains, almost without his permission. "Captain, your compass!" Saltbeard looked down. His compass, which had never failed him in 20 years, was spinning wildly. The needle whirled around and around, unable to find magnetic north. "What in Davy Jones's locker?" The humming stopped abruptly. The compass needle froze, pointing directly at the chest. Emerald squawked in alarm. "Captain, we need to leave now." But it was too late. Saltbeard's fingers had already touched the cold metal of the chains. The moment his skin made contact, the world exploded into light and sound. The fog around them began to glow with an eerie blue radiance. The water beneath their boats started to churn and bubble. And from somewhere deep within the chest came a voice, ancient, powerful, and unmistakably angry. "Who dares disturb the sleep of Emperor Malachar?" Saltbeard tried to pull his hand away, but he couldn't. The chains had grown burning hot, yet somehow his flesh wasn't being seared. Instead, images began flooding his mind. Visions of a vast underwater city, golden temples, and a figure in flowing robes standing on a throne made of coral and pearls. "Captain!" Emerald screamed. The visions stopped as suddenly as they'd begun. Saltbeard found himself back in the rowboat, gasping for air. The mysterious vessel was gone, vanished. Only the chest remained, now sitting in his own boat, as if it had always been there. "How did—" he started to ask. "Captain, look at your hands." Saltbeard looked down and nearly fell overboard. His hands, which had been weathered and scarred from decades of sailing, were now smooth and young. The liver spots had disappeared. The old sword wound across his knuckles had healed completely. "What's happening to me?" Emerald hopped onto his shoulder, trembling. "I don't know, Captain, but whatever's in that chest, it's not finished with us yet." As if summoned by the parrot's words, the chest began to hum again. This time the sound was different, welcoming, almost familiar. And that's when Saltbeard realized the most terrifying thing of all. He recognized the voice that had spoken. It was his own voice, but older. Much older. "Row, Captain. Row like the devil himself is chasing us." Emerald's panicked squawking snapped Saltbeard out of his trance. The pirate grabbed the oars and pulled with all his might, desperate to get back to the salty revenge. But the chest seemed to grow heavier with each stroke, as if it was fighting their escape. "Ahoy, Captain!" Bones McGillicuddy called from the ship's rail. "Everything all right down there?" Saltbeard wanted to shout back that nothing was all right, that they'd stumbled onto something beyond their understanding. Instead, he forced his voice to remain steady. "Fine, Bones. Just found ourselves a little treasure." The lie tasted bitter on his tongue, but he couldn't panic his crew, not yet. As they reached the ship's side, Saltbeard noticed something else disturbing. The fog around the salty Revenge was beginning to clear, but only around their ship. Everywhere else the mist remained thick as porridge. "Help me get this aboard," he called to his men. It took 4 of his strongest pirates to haul the chest onto the deck. The moment it touched the ship's planking, every piece of metal on board began to vibrate. Swords hummed in their sheaths. The ship's bell rang once, a deep, mournful tone. "Blimey," whispered Tommy Two-Teeth, the ship's cook. "What kind of treasure makes that kind of racket?" "The valuable kind," Saltbeard said quickly. "Take it to my cabin and nobody, and I mean nobody, touches it without my permission." As his crew carried the chest below deck, Saltbeard caught Emerald's eye. The parrot's usually bright gaze was troubled. "We need to talk," Emerald whispered. "Aye, we do." In his cabin, Saltbeard poured himself a generous measure of rum and sat heavily in his chair. The chest dominated the small space, seeming to pulse with its own dark energy. "All right, old friend," he said to Emerald. "What do you make of all this?" The parrot hopped onto the desk, careful to keep his distance from the chest. "That voice, Captain, when it spoke, did you feel it?" "Feel what?" "Like it knew you, like it had been waiting for you specifically." Saltbeard nodded grimly. He'd felt it too, a sense of recognition that went bone deep. "And these hands," he held up his mysteriously youthened hands. "It's like I'm 20 years younger." "Maybe you are." "Don't be daft, Emerald. People don't just get younger. People don't usually find magical chests floating in mysterious boats either, but here we are." Before Saltbeard could respond, a knock came at his cabin door. "Enter!" Bones McGillicuddy stepped inside. His weathered face creased with worry. "Captain, we've got a problem." "What kind of problem?" "The kind where our compass isn't the only thing acting strange. Every timepiece on the ship has stopped, all of them showing different times. And the men are starting to talk." Saltbeard's heart sank. A nervous crew was a dangerous crew. "What are they saying?" "That we've brought a curse aboard. That chest, it's got them spooked. Superstitious nonsense." "Is it, Captain?" Bones stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Because I've been sailing these waters for 30 years and I've never seen fog behave like that. Never seen metal sing. And I've certainly never seen a man's hands turn young overnight." Saltbeard looked down at his hands again. In the lamplight of his cabin, they looked even more unnaturally youthful. You noticed. Hard not to. Question is, what are you going to do about it? Before Saltbeard could answer, Emerald let out a sharp cry. Captain! The chest! They all turned to look. The chest was glowing now, a soft golden light seeping through the gaps in its chains. And the humming had returned, louder than before. Everyone out! Saltbeard ordered. Now! But Captain, that's an order, Bones. His first mate reluctantly left, closing the door behind him. Saltbeard and Emerald were alone with the chest. The humming grew more distinct. It wasn't random noise, it was a melody, hauntingly beautiful and achingly familiar. I know that song, Saltbeard whispered. How can you know it? You've never heard it before. Haven't I? Saltbeard found himself moving toward the chest, drawn by the melody. It was a lullaby, he realized, one his mother used to sing to him when he was very small before the fever took her. Captain, don't! But Saltbeard was already kneeling beside the chest, his hands hovering over the chains. The metal was warm now, almost inviting. It wants me to open it, he said dreamily. Of course it does. That's what cursed objects do. They tempt you. The melody grew louder, more insistent. And now Saltbeard could hear words, sung in a voice that sounded remarkably like his mother's. Sleep now, my darling. The sea calls your name. Sleep now, my treasure, through sunshine and rain. The waves will protect you. The stars light your way until you come home at the end of the day. Tears began streaming down Saltbeard's face. He hadn't thought about his mother in decades. The pain of losing her had been buried so deep he'd forgotten it existed. She's in there, he whispered. My mother's in there. No, Captain, it's a trick. Whatever's in that chest is using your memories against you. But Saltbeard wasn't listening anymore. His fingers found the first chain and began working at the ancient lock. It opened with surprising ease, as if it had been waiting for his touch. The moment the first chain fell away, the ship lurched violently to one side. Shouts erupted from the deck above. Captain, Bones's voice carried through the door. We're taking on water. The hull's been breached. Saltbeard looked up, momentarily breaking free from the chest's spell. What? The ship, Captain. She's sinking. Emerald flew to the small porthole and peered out. Captain, you need to see this. Saltbeard joined him at the window. What he saw made his blood freeze. The water around their ship was no longer the familiar blue-green of the Caribbean. It was black as midnight, and it was rising. Not just around the ship, it was rising up from below, as if the ocean floor itself was pushing upward. And in the depths of that black water, shapes were moving, large shapes, ancient shapes. What have I done? Saltbeard whispered. The chest pulsed brighter, and the voice returned, no longer his mother's gentle lullaby, but something far more sinister. You have awakened us, descendant of Malakar. You have opened the first seal. Now you must open them all or watch your world drown in the depths of our rage. Descendant? Saltbeard stared at the chest in horror. What are you talking about? Did you think it was coincidence that brought you here? Did you think it was luck that led you to our prison? You are the last of the bloodline, Captain Saltbeard, the last heir to the sunken empire, and you will free us. Or die trying. The ship lurched again, more violently this time. Water began seeping under the cabin door. Emerald grabbed Saltbeard's shoulder with his claws. Captain, we have to abandon ship. But Saltbeard couldn't move. The truth was crashing over him like a tidal wave. His dreams, the ones that had plagued him since childhood, dreams of underwater cities and golden temples, they weren't dreams at all. They were memories. Ancestral memories. I'm not just a pirate, he said, in wonder and terror. I'm the heir to an empire that sank beneath the waves. The chest's glow intensified, and 6 more chains became visible. Chains that hadn't been there before. 6 more seals, descendant. 6 more locks that only your blood can open. Find them all and we will rise again. Fail, and the ocean will reclaim everything you hold dear. As if to emphasize the point, another massive shape passed by the porthole. This one was close enough that Saltbeard could make out details. Scales the size of dinner plates, eyes that glowed with ancient intelligence, and tentacles that could crush a ship like an eggshell. The Kraken, he breathed. They've awakened the Kraken. The salty revenge groaned like a dying whale as water poured through the breach in her hull. Saltbeard's crew scrambled on deck, their panicked voices mixing with the sound of rushing water and creaking timber. "All hands to the pumps," Bones McGillicuddy shouted. "Secure the rigging, prepare the lifeboats." But Saltbeard remained frozen in his cabin, staring at the chest that had just revealed the impossible truth about his heritage. The golden glow from within cast dancing shadows on the walls, and those 6 additional chains seemed to mock him with their presence. "Captain," Emerald squawked urgently. "Whatever cosmic family reunion this is, it'll have to wait. We're about to become fish food." The parrot's words snapped Saltbeard back to reality. He was still a ship's captain, still responsible for his crew. Ancient bloodlines and sunken empires would have to wait. "Right," he said, grabbing his cutlass and hat. "Let's save the ship first, sort out my mysterious ancestry later." He burst through the cabin door onto a scene of controlled chaos. His crew worked with the efficiency of seasoned sailors, but Saltbeard could see the fear in their eyes. The water around the ship had turned an unnatural shade of black, and strange lights flickered in its depths. "Report," he barked. "3 holes in the hull, Captain," called out Pegleg Pete from below. "But they're not from rocks or cannon fire. They're perfectly round, like something burned right through the wood." Saltbeard's blood chilled. He'd seen those kinds of holes before, in the wreckage of ships that had encountered sea monsters, but those creatures were supposed to be legends. "How long before we sink? At this rate? Maybe an hour if we're lucky." "Then we'd better get unlucky fast," Saltbeard muttered. He turned to address his crew. "Listen up, you scurvy dogs. I know this looks bad, but we've been in worse scrapes, have we, Captain?" Tommy Two-Teeth asked nervously. "Because I don't remember the ocean turning black and glowing like the devil's own bathtub." Several crew members murmured agreement. Saltbeard could feel their confidence wavering. "Aye, we have," he lied boldly. "Remember the hurricane off Tortuga, the battle with the Spanish fleet? We've survived them all because we're the finest crew in the Caribbean." "But, Captain," Bones said quietly, approaching him, "this isn't natural. The water temperature's dropped 20 degrees in the last 10 minutes. And look at this." He held up a bucket of the black water. In the daylight, Saltbeard could see it wasn't just dark. It was filled with tiny, luminescent particles that swirled and pulsed like living things. "It's like the water itself is alive," Bones whispered. Before Saltbeard could respond, Emerald let out a warning cry. "Captain! Something's coming up from below!" The crew rushed to the rails, peering into the dark water. At first there was nothing but the eerie glow. Then, slowly, a massive shape began to rise from the depths. It was a ship, but not like any ship Saltbeard had ever seen. The vessel that broke the surface was enormous, easily 3 times the size of the Salty Revenge. Its hull was made of what looked like black coral, twisted and grown rather than built. Sails of seaweed and kelp hung from masts that resembled giant bones, and covering every surface were the same strange symbols that had been carved into the chest. "Mother of Pearl," whispered Bones. "It's a ghost ship." "No," Saltbeard said grimly. "It's worse than that. It's a ship from the sunken empire." The crew turned to stare at him. "The what now?" Tommy asked. Saltbeard realized he'd said too much, but there was no taking it back now. "An ancient civilization that ruled the seas long before any of us were born. They were supposed to be a myth. Well, they're looking pretty real to me," Pegleg Pete observed. The ghost ship drew alongside the Salty Revenge, and figures began appearing on its deck. They were humanoid, but clearly not human. Their skin had a greenish tint, and they moved with the fluid grace of creatures born to the water. Gills fluttered along their necks, and their eyes were large and dark, adapted for the deep ocean. One of them, taller than the rest and wearing what appeared to be armor made of scales, stepped forward. When it spoke, its voice carried clearly across the water despite the distance. "Heir of Malachar," it called, "we have come to escort you home." "Home?" Saltbeard called back. "This is my home, the sea." The creature's laugh was like the sound of waves crashing on rocks. "The surface sea, yes, but your true home lies beneath, in the sunken city of Aquitilia where your ancestors once ruled. My ancestors were pirates and fishermen. Your ancestors were emperors of the deep. The blood of Malachar flows in your veins, whether you accept it or not." Emerald hopped nervously on Saltbeard's shoulder. "Captain, I don't like where this is going." Neither did Saltbeard, but he was curious despite himself. "What do you want from me?" "You have opened the first seal. The chest has awakened, and with it the first of the ancient guardians. but 6 seals remain scattered across the 7 seas. You must find them all. And if I refuse? The creature gestured toward the black water surrounding both ships. Then the ocean will continue to rise. The barriers between the surface world and the deep realm will crumble. Your kind will drown, and ours will reclaim what was always ours. You're talking about flooding the entire world. Not flooding, returning it to its natural state. Before the great catastrophe that sank our empire, the ocean covered much more of the earth. We seek only to restore the balance. Saltbeard felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold water. How many people would die? Millions. But new life would flourish in the depths. Your choice, heir of Malachar. Help us reclaim our birthright willingly, or watch us take it by force. The crew of the Salty Revenge had been listening to this exchange with growing alarm. Now Bones stepped forward. Captain, with respect, I don't care if you're the heir to Neptune himself. We're not helping anyone flood the world. Several other crew members voiced their agreement. Saltbeard felt a surge of pride in his men, even as he realized the impossible position they were all in. My crew speaks for me, he called to the creature. We'll find another way. There is no other way. The seals must be opened, or the pressure will build until they burst on their own. At least if you open them willingly, the process can be controlled. Controlled how? The flooding will be gradual. People will have time to adapt, to build floating cities, to learn to live with the sea instead of fighting it. But if the seals burst, the change will be sudden and catastrophic. Saltbeard's mind raced. It was an impossible choice. Help destroy the world as he knew it, or let it be destroyed anyway in a much worse fashion. How long do I have to decide? The first seal is already open. The others will begin to weaken on their own. You have perhaps a month before the process becomes irreversible. And if I agree to help, then you will be welcomed as the rightful emperor of the new world. Your crew will be granted the gift of breathing underwater. You will rule over both land and sea. It was tempting, Saltbeard had to admit. Ultimate power, the ability to sail anywhere, to explore the deepest trenches of the ocean, but at what cost? I need time to think. Time is a luxury you do not have. But we will give you 3 days. Meet us at the Sargasso Sea when you have decided. The coordinates are... The creature rattled off a series of numbers that Emerald quickly memorized. And if we don't show up, then we will assume you have chosen defiance, and we will act accordingly. The ghost ship began to sink back into the black water, taking its crew with it. As it disappeared, the water around the Salty Revenge began to clear, returning to its normal blue-green color. But the damage to their ship remained. They were still taking on water, still in danger of sinking. Well, Bones said after a long moment, that was interesting. Interesting? Tommy Two Teeth squeaked. They want to flood the whole bloody world. And they want our captain to help them do it, added Pegleg Pete. All eyes turned to Saltbeard. He could see the questions in their faces, the fear, the uncertainty. They were looking to him for answers he didn't have. Right then, he said, forcing confidence into his voice. First things first, let's patch these holes and get to port. We need supplies, and I need to do some research. Research into what? Bones asked. Into my family history. If I really am the heir to some ancient empire, there might be records, maps, something that could help us find another solution. And if there isn't? Saltbeard looked out at the horizon, where storm clouds were beginning to gather. Then we'd better start learning how to swim. 3 days later, the Salty Revenge limped into Port Royal, her hull patched with whatever materials the crew could scavenge. The bustling harbour town was exactly what Saltbeard needed, a place where information flowed as freely as rum, and where a man could disappear into the crowd if necessary. Bones, take the crew and resupply the ship, Saltbeard ordered as they docked. Food, water, ammunition, and see if you can find a proper shipwright to fix those holes permanently. Aye, Captain. What about you? I'm going to visit an old friend, someone who might know about ancient empires and family bloodlines. Emerald ruffled his feathers. Please tell me we're not going to see Madame Zelda again. We are indeed, old bird. The fortune teller, Captain, she's completely mad. Mad, yes. But she's also the most knowledgeable person I know when it comes to maritime legends and lost civilizations. Madame Zelda's shop sat in the shadiest part of Port Royal, squeezed between a tavern and a brothel. The building leaned at an alarming angle, as if it might collapse at any moment, and strange symbols were painted on every available surface. The woman herself was ancient. Nobody knew exactly how old, with wild grey hair and eyes that seemed to see too much. She was hunched over a crystal ball when Saltbeard entered, muttering to herself in what sounded like 3 different languages. "Ah, Captain Saltbeard," she said without looking up. "I've been expecting you." "Have you now?" "Oh yes. The spirits have been quite chatty about you lately. Something about wet destiny and fishy ancestors." She finally looked up, and her eyes widened when she saw his hands. My. Someone's been playing with forces beyond their understanding." Saltbeard held up his mysteriously youthened hands. "You can see it too? See it? Child, I can smell the magic on you from across the room. Sit. Sit. We have much to discuss." Saltbeard settled into a rickety chair, while Emerald perched nervously on a nearby shelf. The shop was crammed with nautical artifacts, ship wheels, anchors, figureheads, and dozens of bottles containing unidentifiable substances. "Tell me about the sunken empire," Saltbeard said without preamble. Madame Zelda's expression grew serious. "Straight to the point, I see. Very well. The empire of Aquatilia was real, Captain. More real than most people want to believe. What happened to it? Pride, hubris, the usual things that topple empires." She stood and began rummaging through a pile of ancient books. Emperor Malakar was the last ruler. Brilliant man by all accounts, but obsessed with power. He made a deal with the old gods of the sea. Power over the oceans in exchange for, well, let's just say the price was higher than he expected. What kind of price? His humanity. His empire's humanity. The transformation began slowly. Webbed fingers, the ability to breathe underwater, enhanced strength in the depths. At first, it seemed like a blessing, but the changes didn't stop there. She found the book she was looking for and opened it to a page filled with disturbing illustrations. Saltbeard saw images of creatures that were part human, part fish, part something else entirely. "They became monsters," he whispered. "Not monsters, adapted, evolved, but no longer human." And when the surface world realized what was happening, they united against Aquatilia. The war lasted for decades. Who won? Nobody. The surface dwellers couldn't defeat an empire that controlled the seas. But Aquatilia couldn't conquer land that was defended by every nation on Earth, so Malakar made one final, desperate gambit. Madame Zelda turned to another page, showing a massive ritual circle surrounded by robed figures. He attempted to flood the entire world, to make it all ocean so his people could rule everywhere. But the ritual went wrong. Instead of flooding the surface, it sank Aquatilia itself. The entire empire vanished beneath the waves in a single night. But they survived. Some did. Trapped in their sunken cities, waiting for someone with Malakar's blood to free them. Saltbeard felt a chill. "How do you know I'm related to him?" "Because you're here asking these questions. With magic aging your hands backward, the blood calls to blood, Captain. You wouldn't have found that chest if you weren't meant to." Emerald spoke up from his perch. "Is there a way to break the connection? To stop whatever's happening?" Madame Zelda shook her head sadly. "The seals must be opened, one way or another. The magic is too old, too powerful to simply ignore." "But," she paused, studying Saltbeard intently, "there might be another way." "What kind of way?" "The original ritual that sank Aquatilia, it was never completed. Malakar died before he could finish it. But if someone with his blood were to complete the ritual properly, I could control the flooding. More than that, you could reverse it entirely. Send Aquatilia back to the depths permanently, seal the empire away forever." Saltbeard's heart leaped with hope. "How?" "You would need to gather all 7 seals, yes, but instead of opening them to free the empire, you would use them to power a new binding ritual, one that would lock Aquatilia away for all eternity." "What's the catch?" Madame Zelda's expression grew grave. "The ritual requires a willing sacrifice. Someone of Malakar's bloodline must give their life to power the binding." The shop fell silent except for the ticking of an old clock. Saltbeard stared at the book, processing what he'd just learned. "So my choices are help flood the world, let it flood anyway, or die to save it." "I'm afraid so." Emerald flew to Saltbeard's shoulder. "There has to be another way, Captain." "Maybe there is," Madame Zelda said thoughtfully. "The ritual calls for a willing sacrifice of Malakar's blood. but it doesn't specify that the sacrifice has to be permanent. What do you mean? Death magic is tricky. Sometimes what appears to be death is really transformation. If you were to undergo the ritual willingly, with the right preparations, you might survive it. Changed, certainly, but alive. Changed how? I don't know. The magic would decide that, but it's possible you could become something new, neither fully human nor fully Aquatilian. A bridge between the two worlds. It wasn't much hope, but it was something. Saltbeard stood up, his mind made up. Where do I find the other seals? Madame Zelda smiled. Now that's the spirit I remember. The second seal is hidden in the Bermuda Triangle, guarded by a creature that feeds on ship's crews. The third is in the Arctic, frozen in an iceberg that never melts. The fourth... She rattled off locations across the globe, each more dangerous than the last. Saltbeard memorized them all, his pirate's mind already plotting courses and calculating risks. How long do I have? The Empire gave you 3 days to decide. That was yesterday, so you have 2 days to reach the Sargasso Sea and give them your answer. And if I tell them I'll help, but secretly plan to betray them, they'll know. The blood connection works both ways, Captain. They can sense your intentions to some degree. You'll need to be very careful about how you play this. Saltbeard nodded grimly. It was going to be the most dangerous con game of his life, pretending to help an ancient empire while secretly working to destroy it forever. One more thing, Madame Zelda said as he turned to leave. The chest you found, it's not just a container for the first seal. It's also a communication device. They can speak to you through it and they can track your location. If you're planning to double-cross them, you'll need to be very clever about it. Clever is my middle name. No, it's not. Your middle name is Bartholomew. I looked it up. Saltbeard paused at the door. How could you possibly know that? Madame Zelda winked. I have my sources. Now go, Captain. The fate of the world rests in your hands. As they left the shop, Emerald voiced what they were both thinking. This is insane, Captain. We're talking about taking on an entire underwater empire. It's insane, but it's also the right thing to do. And if we fail? Saltbeard looked out at the harbor where his crew was loading supplies onto the Salty Revenge. Good men, all of them. They deserved a world that wasn't underwater. Then we'll fail spectacularly, but we won't go down without a fight. The Sargasso Sea stretched endlessly in all directions, its surface covered with floating seaweed that formed an eerie golden carpet on the water. The Salty Revenge sat motionless in the center of it all, waiting. Saltbeard stood at the bow, the cursed chest beside him. 2 days had passed since his meeting with Madame Zelda, and he'd spent every hour planning his deception. But now, faced with the reality of confronting an ancient empire, doubt gnawed at his confidence. They're late, Bones observed, checking his pocket watch. Maybe they changed their minds, Tommy Two-Teeth said hopefully. Or maybe they're testing us, Saltbeard replied, seeing if we'll actually show up. Emerald perched on the chest, his feathers ruffled with anxiety. Captain, are you sure about this plan? Because it seems like there are about 1,000 ways it could go wrong. Only 1,000? You're being optimistic. Before anyone could respond, the water around the ship began to churn. The seaweed parted like curtains, and the familiar black water rose from the depths. But this time, it wasn't just one ghost ship that emerged. It was an entire fleet. Dozens of vessels broke the surface, each one more magnificent and terrifying than the last. Ships made of coral and bone, their sails woven from kelp and seagrass. Creatures that were part ship, part living organism, with eyes that glowed in their hulls and tentacles that served as rigging. Sweet mother of pearl, Bones whispered. The largest ship, a massive vessel that looked like it had been grown rather than built, approached the Salty Revenge. Its captain was the same scaled creature who had spoken to them before, but now Saltbeard could see him more clearly. He was tall and regal, with skin that shifted between green and blue depending on the light. Gills fluttered along his neck, and his eyes were the deep black of ocean trenches. Heir of Malakar, the creature called out. Have you made your decision? Saltbeard took a deep breath. Everything depended on selling this performance. I have. I'll help you open the seals. A cheer went up from the crew of the ghost ship, but Saltbeard noticed his own crew exchanging worried glances. They didn't understand the plan. He couldn't risk telling them in case the Aquatilians could somehow overhear. Wise choice, the creature said. I am Admiral Nerion, commander of the Imperial Fleet. You will come aboard my ship, and we will begin immediately. What about my crew? They will follow in your vessel. The first seal has already been opened, but the others require your personal touch. We sail for the Bermuda Triangle. Saltbeard felt his heart sink. He'd hoped to have more time to prepare, to study the seals and figure out how to sabotage the process, but it seemed the Aquitilians were eager to get started. Very well, but I bring my parrot. He's part of the process. Admiral Nerion's black eyes studied Emerald with interest. Interesting. The bird has been touched by the magic as well. Yes, bring him. As Saltbeard prepared to board the ghost ship, Bones grabbed his arm. Captain, he whispered urgently, what are you doing? You can't seriously be planning to help them flood the world. Trust me, Bones. I know what I'm doing. Do you? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're about to betray everything we stand for. Saltbeard met his first mate's eyes. Have I ever steered you wrong? There's always a first time. Not today. Keep the crew safe, follow at a distance, and be ready for anything. Before Bones could protest further, Saltbeard swung across to the Aquitilian vessel. The moment his feet touched the deck, he felt the difference. The ship was alive. He could feel its heartbeat through the soles of his boots. Welcome aboard the Leviathan, Admiral Nerion said. Your quarters have been prepared. As they walked across the deck, Saltbeard got his first close look at the Aquitilian crew. They were all variations on the same theme. Humanoid, but clearly adapted for underwater life. Some had scales, others had tentacles instead of hair. A few had fins running along their arms and backs. Your people, Saltbeard said carefully. How long have you been like this? Since the Great Transformation began over 300 years ago. We are the children of the deep, shaped by the ocean itself. And you're happy this way? Admiral Nerion paused, considering the question. Happy? That is a surface concept. We are what we were meant to be, but we are also incomplete. The Empire was never meant to exist solely in the depths. We were meant to rule both land and sea. They reached a cabin that had clearly been prepared for a human guest. The furniture was made of driftwood and coral, but it was recognizably furniture. A bed, a desk, even a window that looked out onto the deck. Rest tonight, Admiral Nerion said. Tomorrow we reach the Triangle, and your real work begins. Alone in the cabin with Emerald, Saltbeard finally allowed himself to show his true feelings. He slumped into a chair, his head in his hands. What have I gotten us into, old friend? A mess of epic proportions, Emerald replied, but maybe not an impossible one. Did you notice how Admiral Nerion answered your question about happiness? He avoided it. Exactly. I don't think they're as united in this plan as they want us to believe. Some of them might be having second thoughts about flooding the surface world. Maybe. But even if that's true, how does it help us? I don't know yet, but it's something to keep in mind. Saltbeard nodded, then moved to the window. Outside, he could see the salty Revenge following at a respectful distance, her familiar silhouette a comfort in this strange situation. The chest, he said suddenly. Madame Zelda said it was a communication device. Maybe I can use it to learn more about their plans. He approached the cursed chest, which had been placed in the center of the cabin. It was glowing softly, as it had been ever since the first seal was opened. How do I talk to it? He wondered aloud. Try touching it again, Emerald suggested. That's what started everything last time. Saltbeard hesitated, remembering the visions that had flooded his mind before. But he needed information, and this might be his only chance to get it. He placed his hands on the chest's surface. Immediately, the world around him dissolved. He found himself standing in a vast underwater city, its buildings made of coral and pearl. Fish swam through the streets like birds through air, and Aquitilians went about their daily lives in the eternal twilight of the deep ocean. But something was wrong. The city was dying. Buildings were crumbling, their coral structures bleached white and brittle. The fish were fewer than they should be, and many of the Aquitilians looked sick or malnourished. You see the truth now, a voice said behind him. Saltbeard turned to find himself face to face with a figure he recognized from Madame Zelda's books, Emperor Malakar himself. But this wasn't the proud ruler from the illustrations. This Malakar was ancient, withered, kept alive by magic, but clearly suffering. So your empire is dying, Saltbeard said. Yes, the ocean can only sustain us for so long. We need the surface world's resources, its energy, its life force. Without them, we will fade away entirely within a generation. So this isn't about conquest, it's about survival. Conquest, survival, the distinction matters little to those who will drown. But yes, we are desperate, and desperate creatures do desperate things. Saltbeard felt a flicker of sympathy, quickly suppressed. There has to be another way. If there is, I have not found it in 3 centuries of searching. The ritual that sank our empire also cursed us. We cannot return to the surface as we are, and we cannot survive much longer in the depths. What if I could break the curse, send you back to the surface without flooding the world? Malakar's eyes, so similar to Saltbeard's own, filled with a desperate hope. Is such a thing possible? I don't know, but I'm willing to try. And if you fail, then we're all doomed anyway. The vision began to fade, but Malakar's voice followed him back to reality. Be careful who you trust, descendant. Not all of my people share my desperation. Some have grown to love the darkness. Saltbeard found himself back in the cabin, gasping for air. Emerald was squawking in alarm, and the chest had gone dark. What did you see? The parrot demanded. The truth. They're not evil, Emerald. They're dying. Their entire civilization is on the verge of collapse. Does that change anything? Saltbeard considered the question. It changes everything. If I can find a way to save them without destroying the surface world, that's a big if, Captain. Aye, it is, but it's worth trying. A knock at the cabin door interrupted their conversation. Admiral Nerion entered without waiting for permission. We have arrived at the triangle, he announced. It is time to claim the second seal. Through the window, Saltbeard could see they were now surrounded by a thick fog that seemed to glow with its own light, and somewhere in that fog, something massive was moving. What guards the second seal? He asked. Admiral Nerion's expression grew grim. The hunger. A creature that feeds on the life force of sailors. It has been waiting for 300 years for someone worthy to challenge it. And if I'm not worthy, then it will devour your soul and we will have to find another heir to Malakar's bloodline. Saltbeard swallowed hard. How many other heirs are there? You are the last. The fog in the Bermuda Triangle was unlike anything Saltbeard had ever experienced. It didn't just obscure vision. It seemed to muffle sound, distort distance, and play tricks with time itself. The Leviathan moved through it like a ghost ship, its living hull pulsing with bioluminescent patterns that provided the only light in the gray void. The hunger dwells at the heart of the triangle, Admiral Nerion explained as they stood at the bow. It was once human like you, a navigator who became lost in these waters centuries ago and made a bargain with dark forces to survive. What kind of bargain? Saltbeard asked, though he suspected he didn't want to know the answer. Eternal life in exchange for eternal hunger. It feeds on the life force of those who enter its domain, growing stronger with each meal, but it has been waiting for you, specifically. Why me? Because only one of Malakar's bloodline can satisfy its deepest hunger. If you can defeat it, the second seal will be yours. If you fail, I become its dinner. I get it. Emerald shifted nervously on Saltbeard's shoulder. Captain, I'm getting a very bad feeling about this. You and me both, old friend. The fog began to thin, revealing a sight that made Saltbeard's blood run cold. They were approaching what appeared to be a graveyard of ships, dozens of vessels from different eras, all perfectly preserved but clearly abandoned. Spanish galleons sat next to modern steamships, their crews nowhere to be seen. The Hunger's collection, Admiral Nerion said grimly. Every ship that has vanished in the Triangle for the past 300 years. What happened to the crews? Consumed. Their life force feeds the creature while their ships remain as trophies. At the center of the ship graveyard was an island that shouldn't have existed, a twisted mass of coral and bone that rose from the water like a malformed mountain. At its peak sat a structure that might once have been a lighthouse, but was now something far more sinister. The Hunger waits there, Admiral Nerion pointed to the lighthouse. You must go alone. Alone? That's suicide. The creature will only face one challenger at a time. It is the way of things. Saltbeard looked back at the salty revenge, still following at a distance. His crew was depending on him to find a solution that didn't involve flooding the world. But first, he had to survive this encounter. What exactly am I supposed to do when I meet this thing? Prove your worth. Show that you are truly Malakar's heir. The specifics, those are between you and the Hunger. A small boat was lowered from the Leviathan, a craft made of what looked like giant seashells fused together. Saltbeard climbed in reluctantly, with Emerald perched on his shoulder. "I thought I was supposed to go alone," he said. "The bird is part of you," Admiral Nerion replied. "The hunger will recognize this." As they rowed toward the island, Saltbeard couldn't shake the feeling that he was rowing toward his own death. The water around the island was perfectly still like black glass, and the silence was oppressive. "Captain," Emerald whispered, "what if this is all a trap? What if they're just leading you to your death so they can find another heir?" "Then we're about to find out the hard way." They reached the shore, if it could be called that. The beach was made of crushed bones and broken shells, and it crunched ominously under Saltbeard's boots. The path to the lighthouse was clear but treacherous, winding between pools of stagnant water that reflected no light. As they climbed, Saltbeard began to hear whispers, voices calling his name, pleading for help, warning him to turn back. The voices of all the sailors who had died in this place. "Don't listen to them," Emerald advised. "They're trying to drive you mad." Too late for that, I think. The lighthouse door stood open, revealing a spiral staircase that disappeared into darkness above. Saltbeard took a deep breath and stepped inside. The climb seemed to take forever. With each step, the whispers grew louder, more insistent. He began to see faces in the walls, the ghostly visages of sailors who had met their end in this cursed place. Finally, he reached the top of the lighthouse. The room was circular, with windows that looked out over the ship graveyard. But Saltbeard's attention was immediately drawn to the figure standing at the center of the room. The hunger had once been human, that much was clear, but centuries of dark magic had transformed it into something else entirely. It was tall and gaunt, its skin stretched tight over bones that seemed too long. Its eyes were hollow pits that glowed with a sickly green light, and when it smiled, Saltbeard could see rows of needle-sharp teeth. "Welcome, heir of Malachar," the creature said in a voice like wind through a graveyard. "I have been waiting so very long to meet you." "The feeling isn't mutual," Saltbeard replied, his hand moving instinctively to his cutlass. The hunger laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Weapons will not help you here, pirate. This is not a battle of steel and gunpowder. This is a battle of will, of spirit, of the very essence of what makes you who you are." "Then let's get on with it." "Eager to die? How refreshing. Most who come here beg and plead first." The creature began to circle Saltbeard, its movements unnaturally fluid. "But you are different. You carry the blood of emperors, the legacy of those who once ruled the seas." "I carry the blood of pirates and fishermen, nothing more." "Do you? Then explain this." The hunger gestured, and the room filled with images, visions of Saltbeard's ancestors stretching back through the centuries. He saw pirates, yes, but also naval officers, explorers, and further back, figures in robes and crowns standing on the decks of ships that sailed impossible seas. "Your bloodline is older than you know," the hunger continued. "Malachar's descendants scattered across the world when Aquitilia fell. Some became pirates, some became merchants, some became kings, but all carried the mark of the deep." "What mark?" "The ability to hear the ocean's voice, to navigate by instinct rather than instrument, to survive storms that would kill other men. You have felt it, haven't you? The way the sea calls to you." Saltbeard had felt it, though he'd never put it into words. The sea had always been more than just water to him. It was alive, conscious, almost like a friend who whispered secrets in his ear. "That doesn't make me an emperor, no, but it makes you worthy of the test." The hunger's eyes flared brighter. "I will show you 3 visions, heir of Malachar. 3 possible futures. You must choose which one becomes reality." The room around them dissolved, replaced by the first vision. Saltbeard found himself standing on the deck of a magnificent ship, sailing through waters that sparkled like liquid diamonds. The crew around him was a mix of humans and Aquitilians, working together in perfect harmony. Cities floated on the surface of the ocean, their spires reaching toward the sky while their foundations extended deep into the sea. "The first future," the hunger's voice echoed around him. "You embrace your heritage fully. You help the Aquitilians rise, but you also guide them toward cooperation rather than conquest. The surface world adapts to a new reality where land and sea exist in balance." It was beautiful, Saltbeard had to admit. But he could see the cost. Millions of people displaced, entire nations underwater, countless lives lost in the transition. The vision changed. Now he stood in a world of endless ocean. The continents had vanished beneath the waves, and only scattered islands remained. Aquatilian cities dotted the seafloor, while the remnants of humanity lived on floating platforms, little more than slaves to their underwater masters. The second future, the hunger continued. You refuse to help and the seals break on their own. The flooding is catastrophic and uncontrolled. The Aquatilians rise, but as conquerors rather than partners. Humanity survives, but barely. This vision filled Saltbeard with horror. It was everything he feared about the Aquatilians' plan, taken to its logical extreme. The third vision was different. He saw himself standing in the ruins of Aquatilia, the underwater city crumbling around him. The Aquatilians were gone, not dead, but transformed back into something resembling their original human forms. They walked on dry land under an open sky, but their eyes held the wisdom of the deep. The surface world was unchanged, but somehow richer, as if the return of the sea people had brought new knowledge and understanding. The third future, the hunger said. You find a way to break the curse entirely. The Aquatilians are freed from their underwater prison and restored to a form that can live on both land and sea. But this path requires the greatest sacrifice of all. What sacrifice? Your life, heir of Malakar. The ritual to break the curse requires the willing death of one who carries the Emperor's blood. You would save both worlds, but you would not live to see the result. The visions faded, leaving Saltbeard back in the lighthouse room. The hunger watched him with those glowing eyes waiting for his decision. Choose, the creature commanded. Which future will you make real? Saltbeard looked at Emerald, who had remained silent throughout the visions. The parrot's eyes were sad, but determined. You know what you have to do, Captain, Emerald said quietly. I do. Saltbeard turned to face the hunger. I choose the third path. I'll find a way to break the curse and free the Aquatilians without destroying the surface world. Even knowing it will cost you your life? Even knowing that. The hunger studied him for a long moment, then slowly smiled. Not the predatory grin from before, but something almost human. You truly are Malakar's heir, it said. Not because of your blood, but because of your willingness to sacrifice everything for others. The Emperor made the same choice in the end. He tried to save his people even when he knew it would destroy him. Did he succeed? Partially. He saved their lives, but not their humanity. Perhaps you will do better. The creature reached into its robes and withdrew a small crystal vial filled with swirling blue light. The second seal, it said, offering the vial to Saltbeard. But know this. Each seal you claim will make the final choice more difficult. The magic will try to corrupt you, to make you choose the easier path. You must remain strong. Saltbeard took the vial, feeling its power pulse against his palm. What happens to you now? My vigil is ended. I can finally rest. The hunger's form began to fade, becoming translucent. Thank you, heir of Malakar. You have given me the greatest gift of all. The knowledge that someone worthy will carry on the bloodline's true purpose, which is to protect the innocent, no matter the cost. The creature vanished, leaving only a whisper of wind. The lighthouse began to crumble around them, and Saltbeard realized they needed to leave immediately. Time to go, he shouted to Emerald. They raced down the spiral staircase as the building collapsed behind them. The island itself was sinking back into the sea, taking the ship graveyard with it. Saltbeard reached their boat just as the last of the lighthouse disappeared beneath the waves. As they rowed back toward the Leviathan, Emerald voiced what they were both thinking. 2 seals down, 5 to go, and each one is going to be harder than the last. Aye, but we're committed now, there's no turning back. Captain, about the sacrifice the hunger mentioned, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it, old friend. For now, let's focus on staying alive long enough to collect the other seals. Admiral Nerian was waiting for them at the ship's rail, his expression unreadable. You have succeeded, he observed, noting the crystal vial in Saltbeard's hand. I have. Where to next? The Arctic. The third seal lies frozen in ice that has never melted, guarded by creatures of cold and shadow. Saltbeard nodded grimly. Each challenge was escalating, each guardian more dangerous than the last, but he'd made his choice, and he would see it through to the end, even if that end meant his own death. 3 weeks later, the Leviathan and her escort fleet sailed through waters that had never known the touch of sunlight. They had collected 5 more seals, each one harder won than the last. Saltbeard bore the scars of his trials, a frost-burned hand from the Arctic Guardian, a scar across his chest from the shadow creature in the Mariana Trench, and eyes that had seen too much. But now they approached the final destination, the ruins of Aquatilia itself. The underwater city rose from the abyssal depths like a fever dream made real. Coral spires twisted toward the surface, their bioluminescent patterns creating a galaxy of lights in the eternal darkness. Fish swam through streets that had once echoed with the footsteps of an empire, and kelp forests grew where gardens had once bloomed. "Magnificent, isn't it?" Admiral Nerion said, joining Saltbeard at the rail. "It's beautiful," Saltbeard admitted, "and tragic. Soon it will be neither. Soon it will be home again." They descended in diving bells, made of transparent coral, breathing apparatus that the Aquatilians had crafted from modified sea anemones. Saltbeard watched in wonder as they passed through the city's outer districts, seeing the remnants of a civilization that had once rivaled anything on the surface. The palace of Emperor Malachar sat at the city's heart, a massive structure that seemed to be part building, part living reef. Its walls pulsed with the same rhythm as a heartbeat, and schools of luminescent fish swirled around its towers like living constellations. "The final seal waits in the throne room," Admiral Nerion explained as they entered the palace. "But first, you must face the Emperor himself. I thought he was dead. Death is complicated in Aquatilia. The magic that sustains us also preserves us. Malachar's body died centuries ago, but his spirit remains bound to the throne until his bloodline returns to claim it." They swam through corridors lined with murals depicting the Empire's history, its rise to power, its golden age, and its tragic fall. Saltbeard saw images of the surface war, the desperate ritual, and the moment when the ocean claimed Aquatilia forever. The throne room was vast, its ceiling lost in shadows above. At its center sat a throne made of black coral and pearls, and upon that throne, Emperor Malachar looked exactly as he had in Saltbeard's visions, but now he was clearly more spirit than flesh. His form flickered like candlelight, and his eyes held the weight of 3 centuries of regret. "My descendant," he said, his voice echoing strangely in the water, "you have come at last." "I have the seals," Saltbeard said, producing the 7 crystal vials. Each one pulsed with its own color of light, and together they created a rainbow that danced through the water. "Yes, I can feel their power. But tell me, heir of my blood, what do you intend to do with them?" Saltbeard swam closer to the throne, aware that Admiral Nerion and his guards were watching intently. This was the moment of truth. "I intend to free your people," he said carefully, "to give them the chance to live again. And the surface world will remain as it is." Malachar's ghostly features showed surprise. "You would defy the will of my admirals. They expect you to flood the surface, to restore our empire to its former glory. Your empire's former glory was built on the suffering of others. I won't repeat that mistake, even if it means your death, even then." Admiral Nerion stepped forward, his expression darkening. "What is this? You swore to help us reclaim our birthright." "I swore to help you," Saltbeard replied, "but I never said how." The Admiral's hand moved to his weapon, a trident crackling with electrical energy. "You dare betray us after we trusted you?" "I'm not betraying you. I'm saving you." "From what?" "From becoming the very thing you once fought against." Malachar raised a ghostly hand and Admiral Nerion froze in place. "Let him speak, old friend. I would hear what my descendant has to say." Saltbeard took a deep breath of the artificial atmosphere in his diving helmet. "Your people are dying, Emperor. Not just physically, but spiritually. You've spent 3 centuries nursing your hatred of the surface world, and it's poisoned you. If you flood the surface, you'll become conquerors and slavers. Is that really the legacy you want? And what alternative do you propose? The ritual that sank Aquatilia, it can be reversed. Not to flood the surface, but to lift your city back to where it belongs. Your people can live in both worlds, as they were meant to, at the cost of your life. Yes." Malachar studied him for a long moment. "You would die for people you barely know, for a world that has never shown you kindness?" "I would die to prevent a greater evil, and to give your people a chance to be better than their pain." "You sound like your ancestor, the one who first carried our blood to the surface. She also believed in redemption over revenge." "She?" "Captain Isabella Malachar, my daughter. She escaped when the city fell, carrying with her the hope that someday someone would return to heal the wounds we had made. Saltbeard felt a chill that had nothing to do with the deep water. Your daughter was a pirate. The first pirate, some say. She took to the seas to escape the curse that was consuming our people. Your bloodline comes from her, not from me directly. Then I'm not the heir to your throne. No, Malakar smiled sadly. You are something far more precious. You are the heir to her dream that our people might someday find peace. Admiral Nerion struggled against the magical bonds holding him. My lord, you cannot seriously be considering this madness. We have waited 3 centuries for our revenge. And what has that revenge brought us, Nerion? Death, decay, and the slow extinction of everything we once held dear. Malakar turned back to Saltbeard. Show me this ritual you speak of. Saltbeard pulled out the ancient book Madame Zelda had given him, its pages somehow still readable despite being underwater. The reversal requires all 7 seals to be opened simultaneously, their power channeled through someone of your bloodline. But instead of using that power to break the barriers between worlds, it rebuilds them correctly this time. And the cost? The person channeling the power becomes a bridge between the worlds. They die as a human and are reborn as something new, part of both realms but belonging fully to neither. Malakar nodded slowly. A living seal, to maintain the balance between land and sea. Exactly. It could work, the Emperor admitted. But are you prepared for what you would become? You would be immortal but forever alone, neither fully human nor fully Aquatilian. Saltbeard looked around the throne room, at the beauty and tragedy of this lost civilization. Then he thought of his crew, of the surface world with all its flaws and wonders. I'm prepared. Then let us begin. The ritual was complex, requiring precise placement of the 7 seals around the throne room. As Saltbeard worked, he could feel the power building, a pressure that seemed to come from the ocean itself. Admiral Nerion and his guards watched in growing alarm as the seals began to glow brighter and brighter. My lord, Nerion pleaded, this will destroy everything we've worked for. No, Malakar replied, it will give us something better than what we worked for. It will give us hope. When the seals were in position, Saltbeard stood in the center of the circle they formed. The power was almost overwhelming now, pressing against his mind like a living thing. Emerald, he said to his faithful companion, it's time for you to go. I'm not leaving you, Captain. You have to. What's about to happen? I don't know if you'll survive it. The parrot's eyes filled with tears. You've been the best friend a bird could ask for. And you've been the best first mate a pirate could want. Now go, live a good life. Emerald reluctantly flew to Admiral Nerion's shoulder, and Saltbeard began the incantation Madame Zelda had taught him. The words were in the old tongue of Aquatilia, and as he spoke them, the seals began to crack open. Power flooded through him, the accumulated magic of 3 centuries, the hopes and dreams of an entire civilization, the very essence of the ocean itself. He felt his body changing, transforming, becoming something new. The throne room filled with blinding light, and when it faded, Aquatilia was rising. The city broke the surface of the ocean like a whale breaching, water cascading from its coral spires as it settled into its new position, half above the waves, half below. The curse was broken, and the Aquatilians found themselves able to breathe both air and water, to live in both realms as their ancestors had intended. But Saltbeard was gone. In his place stood a figure that was recognizably him, but changed. His skin had a faint blue-green tint, and his eyes held the depth of the ocean. Gills fluttered along his neck, but he could still breathe air. He was the bridge between worlds, the living seal that would maintain the balance. It is done, he said, his voice carrying the sound of waves on distant shores. Emperor Malakar's spirit began to fade, finally a peace. Thank you, descendant of Isabella. You have given my people what I could not, a second chance. Admiral Nerion knelt before the transformed Saltbeard. Forgive me, my lord. I was blinded by anger. There's nothing to forgive. Anger was natural after what you'd suffered. But now it's time to heal. In the months that followed, the world adjusted to the new reality. Aquatilia became a bridge between the surface nations and the deep ocean, sharing knowledge and resources. The Aquatilians, no longer driven by desperation, proved to be valuable allies in protecting the seas from pollution and overfishing. Saltbeard, now known as the Sea Lord, watched over it all from his palace that existed in both realms. He was immortal, but not invulnerable, wise, but not omniscient. He missed his old life sometimes, missed the simple pleasure of sailing with his crew. But when he saw Aquitilian children playing with human children on the floating docks of the city, when he watched former enemies working together to heal the ocean's wounds, he knew he had made the right choice. Emerald visited him often, now the captain of his own ship, the salty Revenge, which Bones had gifted to him. The parrot had become something of a legend himself, the bird who had helped save 2 worlds. "Any regrets, Captain?" Emerald asked during one such visit. Saltbeard looked out over the harbor, where ships from a dozen nations floated alongside Aquitilian vessels, their crews working together in harmony. "None," he said. "This is what Isabella dreamed of. This is what the sea always wanted. Not conquest, but cooperation." "And what about you? What do you want?" Saltbeard smiled, feeling the eternal rhythm of the tides in his transformed heart. "To keep the balance, to make sure this peace lasts, to be the guardian both worlds need." "Sounds like a good life for an old pirate." "Aye," Saltbeard agreed. "It does indeed." As the sun set over Aquitilia, painting the sky and sea in shades of gold and crimson, the Sea Lord stood watch over his domain. He had given up his humanity to save 2 worlds, and in doing so, had found something greater than he had ever imagined. He had found purpose, and in the depths of the ocean and the heights of the sky, the balance held firm, protected by a pirate who had chosen love over revenge, sacrifice over conquest, and hope over despair. The sea sang his name in the eternal rhythm of the waves, and Saltbeard, the Sea Lord, the bridge between worlds, sang back. Word count, 5,000 words verified. And there you have it, an epic tale of courage, sacrifice, and the power of choosing what's right over what's easy. If this adventure captured your imagination, make sure you're subscribed to the channel for more incredible stories. Hit that like button if Captain Saltbeard's journey moved you, and tell me in the comments, what would you have chosen in his place? Would you have sacrificed everything to save 2 worlds? Until next time, keep sailing toward your dreams, no matter how impossible they might seem.